So next we're going to make the spacers here that go in between our two frame pieces. Most of that's going to be done using a vertical milling machine. So to get started, we're going to start by cutting our two pieces to exact length. So we need to first square off the cut end.
To slam the doors?
Yeah, alright. Should I just do the whole thing again, right? Okay, so now we're going to make our spacers that go in between the frame pieces. You can see that one has a threaded hole in there for our elevation adjustment, and then on the ends we're going to have two threaded holes also. And the main thing here is we got to get both of these pieces to be the exact same length. Okay, and we're going to start off with our two spacers here. They're just rough cut to rough length, so we want to square one end to start, and then we'll get the other end and get it to exact length. So what I have here is a vertical milling machine to do this with. Have an end mill, and basically this is about a 1/2 inch end mill. Any end mill in that general size is going to work. You don't have to have this, but I have some aluminum step jaws in here that just make it easier to set the piece down in there. You can make those relatively easy if you don't have them. It's also, I like to, we can put the other piece in there just to keep the vise from going crooked while it's in there. Okay, so I'll bring my cutter down in that proximity of the end of the spacer there, and I'm in high range on the milling machine, so I'm going to run this at about 800 RPMs. And the most important thing when you're on a milling machine, to make sure your cutter goes clockwise when you turn it on. It can be kind of confusing on some of these machines. This says reverse or forward. Some machines say high or low. But the most important thing is to watch your cutter take off in a clockwise rotation. Okay, once you get that turned on, I'm going to carefully move that up and just touch the cutter to the end of the metal. Okay, and when it does that, just going to go another 10 thousandths or so. So I can use a digital readout if you have that, or you can use the dials on the handles. But I've zeroed out the X direction. So after I touched it off, we go about 10 thousandths, and we're just going to feed that through nice and steady. That's one piece done. I'll just move my other piece up. Square the end on the second piece. So same thing, touch it off, zero out the readout. Okay, we just barely touched it. Zero out the X direction and go about 10 thousandths. And again, nice and steady as you feed that through. Okay, so that squares the end on them. Now we're going to basically square the end on the other edge of the metal, and then we can measure and cut it to exact length. So we'll flip that around. pieces should be about 100 thousandths or 1/8 of an inch or so too long to start with. So you should have plenty of material to square it off. So I'm doing the opposite end now. Touch that off. Zero it. Just take another light pass.
Now,
Now that you have two squared ends on the metal, you can take a measurement. Okay, this says that it's 1.605 right now, and it needs to be a perfect 1.5. So, I haven't moved anything on my readout. So I'm just going to zero it off. That's where I took the last cut, right there. And I figured that I need to take off 105 thousandths of an inch. I'm going to move that. 0.105. Lock that X table in place so it doesn't move. And we'll take a cut. I'm going to zero that out. Before I move anything, I'm going to set a stop on there. That way I don't have to measure the second piece. Okay, so I have my stop set at the correct place. So I'm just going to switch. Make sure the end that you squared goes to the stop. Going to bring my cutter down again, double check that X is on 0. Make sure that cutter goes clockwise. Okay, now our two spacers are exactly the same length. Okay, so after we get them to next length, the next thing I'm going to do is drill and tap the holes on each end. Now that may seem a little early to do that, but I like doing it this way because I'm mass producing these with 20 kids. You can probably figure out different ways to do it on your own, but I'm doing it this way. That way every piece is the same when we go to drill and tap it. I am eventually going to clean up all of the other surfaces of the piece, but when you're doing this with a lot of people, you know, that could vary. One person might do it differently than the next person, so before we start changing the thickness, I like to drill and tap the holes first. So what I have here is an edge finder, and I need to find the edge in the Y direction and the edge in the X direction. And the distance between the two holes is 400 thousandths of an inch. So basically I need to find the center is really what I need. So edge finders run at about 1,000 RPMs, and then my digital readout, and most digital readouts do. If you've never looked at your manual, you could probably find a way to automatically find the center. It's got a nice little program. So on this one, it's the CL for center line. And it's asking me up here, it says, where is your first edge in the X direction? So I'm going to do that. Turn it on clockwise. to drill those holes at 0.2 and negative 0.2. So we can go ahead and set the X there for 0.2. The process here, we're going to spot drill it, and we'll take our tap drill, and then we'll take our tap to thread the holes. It's a 632 tap, so select the appropriate tap drill for your tap that you're using. And I like to just use a stubby spot drill for this. So we're going to start off with the spot drill. We're going to drill both holes. Okay, that just goes in real shallow. Then we're going to take the tap drill. And on that, we want to go in. I'm going to use the table and lift the table up. Actually, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to set a stop. And we need to drill in about 5/8 of an inch or so. So when the drill bit is at the top there, since this mill doesn't have a Z readout, just kind of cheat. We just need to be approximate here. That should be about 5/8 deep. Lock that into place. And then a small drill bit, use some cutting oil, and I'm going to peck in and out at that. Just go nice and lightly. Okay, so we got the holes drilled. Now we'll go ahead and thread it. I'm going to take a little tap holder. Get a different one. Take a T-handle tap wrench, and then what I have here is a spring center that's going to keep our tap straight up and down. So definitely want to use some cutting oil. And we're just going to turn that down in. And it's a real small tap, so it's not going to take much force. just, if you have to turn hard, something's wrong. And just go in a little bit, back it out. And if you get in there about 3/8 of an inch or so, that should be more than enough. Definitely not go to the bottom of your drilled hole. That probably cause your tap to break. And go to your other hole, -0.2. Now when I'm doing this with my group of kids, I don't let them do this. I just go ahead and set up the CNC machine, and I have the CNC drill and thread all these. Otherwise I'd spend a fortune in drill bits and taps because kids tend to break things. Okay, so that's one side. And then you just need to flip that piece over, and I would just end frame it like that. You're going to repeat the steps on there, spot drill, drill, and tap, and then the same thing on the other spacer. And that will take care of the threaded holes.